Hi. Yes, every chance I get I'm going to be using the Perturabo face. I just think it's really funny.
It's a good
I'm Arthur,
face.
and this is part 3 in a 20-part series I am doing in-depth analyses of the Primarchs in order of the legions. Do you need to have seen the other parts to understand this one? No, but it would make me happy. Of all of the private conversations I've been having with other individuals in the Warhammer sphere, I do find that a common thing that comes up, especially in regards to Primarchs, is my opinion of Perturabo, and my opinions on his legion as well, as I tend to have complex feelings about the two of them, and just their entire characterization throughout the fiction. There are a lot of things to learn with each of the Primarchs, and it's why I'm going to title each video with the same kind of format that you've been seeing so far, so you can all understand immediately the purpose of the video and what the most key features.
Okay, I like this. But I will say, looking at the art here, I have one criticism of the art. Sanguinius has got all these scars. And that's not right. Because, like, look, Fulgrim doesn't have, like, any scars. He looks tired, honestly. Relatable, bestie. But, like, Sanguinius, he shouldn't be all scarred. He's, like, gorgeous and perfect. I don't know why they made him all scarred. That's kind of annoying. Like, I'm not saying scars are, like, bad and ugly and that you're less of a person because you have scars. I'm just... It kind of goes against, like, the general look of Sanguinius, I think.
Of that character's backstory is. I feel the title for Perturabo could actually imply a lot more than what you would think. So, because Perturabo isn't exactly known for being a kind individual, he's actually rather known for being a bit of a meanie poo-poo head at the best of times.
It's being kind to him.
The book I'm going to be
is what you
referencing
need.
for the majority of my points is going to be the Perturabo Primarch novel.
Solid
because
book.
It actually covers a lot of the topics I find are most important for him. So a good example as to how much of a meanie poo-poo head he is, in that specific book, a messenger came to tell him that Olympia, the planet, had rebelled, which was his home planet if you're unfamiliar with it. So when he heard about it, he picked up the man and just started squeezing him by the shoulders until you had a nice glass of man juice on the floor right underneath him. The man just crushed him into a pile of goo. It was gross.
Never shoot the
apparently
messenger.
He'd never heard about not shooting the messenger, but I digress. Before I get into my thoughts on Perturabo, I just want to thank my channel members for supporting me. With your help, I am able to do this as a job. I have so much actual fun doing these videos, so if you want to support me as well as gain access to additional content, then become a channel member today. So let's just get into it. We can interpret Perturabo as a character from numerous lenses, but the one I find the most humanizing of his entire story is simply put that he was failed by every single person around him in more ways than one. So he treated everybody around him as if they were a failure, like they were treating him. Expanding on that, I think Perturabo is a very complicated and often misunderstood individual. I think he was a kind soul that just wanted to contribute to the world in his own way, but was forced to become a weapon of war by many individuals throughout his life.
I've heard that quite a bit.
Let's get into it now. One of the most commonly brought up facts about Perturabo is that he is a shitty dad. Like, how he treats his legion is probably among the lower ranks of Primarch to Legion relationships I have ever seen in my life. Even Mortarion treats his legion better than Perturabo did, and that dude looks like the damn Grim Reaper and drinks poison. A good example that a lot of people tend to cite is when he took control of his legion. Normally, the legions, once they get their Primarch, get a massive boost in morale and leadership just because they know where they get their traits from, which is cool. Yeah. But it also has this weird proximity effect where the Space Marines will automatically listen to their Primarch to their own detriment. Now, it's not entirely a 100% level of control. There are quite a few Loyalist Iron Warriors, or, well, there were, but when Perturabo took over the Legion, he saw that they had failed a mission or two recently, and instead of redoubling his efforts to make them a stronger Legion, he simply demanded they decimate themselves. removing 1/10 of the Legion's numbers as punishment to prove they will never fail again. So these are the actions people see. They are the bitter and nasty things that Perturabo has been seen doing, and from a top-down perspective, from some brainlet, they can just say, "Oh, he bitter and mean?" Oh man, straw man arguments are great, but people tend to see this and make the conclusion that he's just a mean, bitter man for the sake of being a mean, bitter person. And loosely they can see that it was a product of his upbringing, but I very rarely see the argument brought up that there is a significant portion of reasoning behind why he does what he does, and it's a lot more tragic and a lot more sad than it is just being frustrated with an angry little man. I can guarantee you it wasn't just he was born this way, baby. Because I find the Primarchs are very much a mixture of nature versus nurture, but nurture does tend to play a bigger part. Perturabo expects the world around him to perform within a set boundary that is both logical and optimal, because as a child, when he grew up on Olympia, that is the doctrine that he was set to live under. He was given set rules to operate under, and as long as he performed to the best of his abilities and succeeded at them, which he always did because he was a Primarch, he would be continued to be praised for what he did. Now, let's not confuse praise with kindness, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. He was used by his adoptive dad, the Tyrant of Locos, was shown an almost cold indifference outside of that praise for his fact of just being a Primarch. His needs were only met on the basis of something you would show off as a great treasure. Perturabo was seen by his father as nothing more than a tool for war and conquest once he was of age. But here's the part I find most interesting, and that's that in Perturabo's free time, he actually spent most of his time making advancements in agricultural equipment, things to improve the lives of others around him. It's pretty cool, honestly. See, he had a few Primarch powers that separated him from his brothers, which a lot of Primarchs tend to have multiple, but the one I tend to focus on is, simply put, he can look at most things and immediately know how to make them better in...
Yes, it's really cool. The fact that he can look at something, he knows how it works, and he knows how he can improve it. But like the downside of that, it can get boring after a while. He can't really have curiosity, which is like really sad that he can't learn in like a way where he can explore and develop something. It just sucks.
Some way, shape, or form. Now, it depends on the situation, because better is often not really defined by any strict means, but he would often try to improve tilling machines, tractors, to help move grains better, and so on and so forth. But his adoptive father kept moving him to focus more on war efforts, and eventually that was all he was going to work on until, well, now, which is a bit of a tragedy. It mirrors a lot of personal accounts of artists growing up in restrictive households that had their parents say that they can't work on this specific project. You need to learn how to be an engineer or a doctor or some shit, when you secretly just wanted to paint or maybe even just raise chickens or some shit. I don't know. But there is one individual that is incredibly important in his story, and it was the only person in his life to ever treat him with unbidden affection.
Sister.
There wasn't a back and forth in the same sense that he had with his stepdad and every other general that he ended up working with, where he would provide his services and they would provide him with praise. The only person who showed him kindness without any strings attached was his adoptive sister. Shit. Hi, this is video editor Arthur.
Have fun.
Yeah, I goofed. It's been a while since I've read the Perturabo Primarch novel, and I completely forgot that his sister's name was not actually Calliope, it's Caliphany. I got the two names mixed up because of there's a D&D character that I've been interacting with. You know, it doesn't really matter. But yeah,
understandable.
I forgot her name.
If you're a VTuber fan, you would have gone with Calliope and not Caliphany.
Her name was Calliope for the entirety of this recording, and instead of being a competent individual, I'm going to just put this here and tell you all that, hey, while I was editing, I remembered that it's actually Caliphany and not Calliope. So whenever I say Calliope, it's actually Caliphany.
I wouldn't want to re-record that.
Calliope, who treated him like she would any other brother and was just nice to him. But one drop of clean water in a mire is not going to immediately purify what is brewing. And when he had to leave the planet to join his actual father, that is when things started to worsen further, as he was treated the same, a tool to be used. Now, say what you want about the Emperor, but I will say it is also in Perturabo's hands at this point. When you put up this sort of posture that you can get something done and won't ever complain, you will be sent on the more difficult missions. So, not mentioning that he actually enjoyed being praised for his efforts or shown a bit of kindness, and not being open about how he felt about anything made him almost the perfect silent tool. Most of his brothers knew he was unhappy, but he never truly spoke out about it, or at least outside of his legion. The Emperor, when interacting with his children, tends to be a very force meets force kind of individual. So because of that, he met Perturabo with the same kind of cold indifference that Perturabo puts out there. So in the end, it makes things a bit harder to stomach, or at least incredibly sad, when he returns to his home world of Olympia to find it has rebelled and forgotten why they served him. It ended with him going down to the planet and simply saying, burn this whole city to the goddamn ground.
Yep.
And that's what he
bad.
did. They were a tool that lashed out and didn't fulfill their purpose, and therefore they were discarded like how he felt he would be if he didn't provide a purpose to everyone that asked of him. So he lashed out almost in a childlike rage that if you do not fall in line, you get the stick, forgetting that you also need to put a carrot at the end of it for the whole analogy to work. This all culminates further in the single most tragic part of Perturabo's life, when he accidentally kills his elderly sister Calliope. Now,
how much of it really was an accident?
She had become pretty withered in her old age, since it had been 60, 70 years since the original time that Perturabo had been on the planet. But he could still see who she was, and she could never forgive him for what he had become. Upon her death was the final step in his damnation.
That's cute art,
the road to
honestly.
damnation, in my mind, is like a ladder extending upwards, where every step you take on it causes the step behind you to snap and become unusable. At a certain point, you can still jump off and come back down to a safe level, but the higher you go, the harder it is for you to jump off without harming yourself. And at a certain point, jumping off means certain death. And this step was the final one in his mind. He could never come back. So with all that in mind, I will pose
he had
to you
regrets,
a question
for
with
sure.
this character, being as intense and insane as he is. Why? Why did he do it? And why did he become what he was? Kindness and the lack thereof is my answer. To grow up with indifference is different from growing up with hate. Being hated your entire life can cause you to become gnarled, like an old dried up tree, where you will bend and break with ease. But when you grow up around people who treat you with a passive indifference, you learn to not care about the world around you and see it in only pragmatic and practical
I like
terms.
this take.
Some Primarchs had a naturally kind soul, and I think that Bo is one of them, just on the basis of how he responded to one individual who treated him with genuine compassion. The bitterness, the anger, and the sadness that is permanently affixed to Perturabo is there because every single person along the way failed him, and not even by his standards. They had all the chances in the world to show him genuine compassion when it was the most important lesson to teach him in the world, and they didn't. They either chose not to, and the only person who did died by his hands. It's why Calliope's death hits so hard. She was his only anchor, and now that she's gone,
Dude,
well,
I
he
like
falls
this take.
down the
This is a
path
good
of bitterness,
take.
where he sees that he is the only one who can get any job done, which, when in close proximity to Fulgrim, is like kind of correct, but you get what I mean. I think kindness and showing genuine compassion is both the easiest and the hardest thing to do to someone that you know nothing about or care nothing about. A quote I tend to use is, "We think too much and feel too little." If you're familiar with the film that came from, you're cool, I guess.
I
Thumbs
don't
up.
know that,
But
sorry.
the quote is especially applicable for those we deem as nothing more than a tool, or even someone that we dislike. We tend to find it really easy to latch on negative emotions emotions to individuals that we find it socially acceptable to dislike. So the social standard for someone like Perturabo, who is known for being a grumpy curmudgeon, who's known for being a bitter man, who will do any job you give him, but also complain about it the entire time, makes it a bit of a self-perpetuating cycle where people will treat him like he is that, and therefore he continues to act like that. I find there is a point to be made about how we treat people we don't like, or treat people we see as having permission to treat like we don't like them. And I'm not here to make that point. I just think that it is easier to be kind than it is to be horrible to people. Because if you do not treat people kindly, and you treat them with passive indifference at best, and kind of a malevolence at worst, you get Perturabo, a self-perpetuating cycle of people treating him like garbage, people not seeing the hurt he has, and thus he keeps treating people like garbage himself. He just needed to be proven wrong once, shown that kindness and civility was the proper way of treating people, but he never was. And now...
That's a really good quote. I'm sorry, I've been sitting here pondering it while he's been talking. And honestly, that is so accurate. Recently, I had been harboring some frustrations towards a particular person for no good reason. In the sense, like, I was thinking too much about it and not feeling enough. I think there needs to be a balance between the two. But in that case, I wasn't thinking about how that particular person was feeling or why they were behaving a certain way at the time. That just kind of hits home, because I regret the way I was acting and behaving and thinking about them. I'm not going to say who the person is. Look, it's tied to real life stuff.
He never will be, because if you aren't familiar, Perturabo, Peter Turbo, the man, the myth, the big sad himself, has ascended to demonhood and is angry forever at everyone.
And he's coming for you.
At least on the apathy thing, not the demon thing. That'd be rad, but like suck, but whatever. Because I moved around a lot as a kid, as my parents tried to find work to sustain their lifestyles as well as mine and my sister's. So when you show up and have obvious psychological problems like I did in childhood, it's easy for people to treat you like garbage, simply seeing that you're kind of the outlier, and I was someone who acted out a lot like Perturabo. And no one ever really saw the reason behind it. Now, I don't blame them for it. That's why I relate to Perturabo, where I can see the cycle of apathy and just indignance that comes with his existence, and I relate to that specific part. I don't think I'm alone on that. I think there's a lot of people who can relate to growing up different, growing up weird in a world around them where people don't exactly hate them or show them any kind of malice, but just ignore them and feel left by the wayside.
Ooh,
I think
rough.
that is one of the most emblematic things to describe Perturabo as a whole, and that's what people tend to describe him as. He is bitter, hard to be around, but incredibly competent, and I have so many friends that are like that. They grew up socially awkward. They grew up with this kind of inability to acquiesce to social norms that made it so that it was hard for them to fit in, and they grew up jaded and bitter because of it, which kind of loops back to that analogy that I was giving before, where it can be both incredibly difficult and incredibly easy to be kind. But I am not here to tell you what you are supposed to do. I am just here to tell you my perspective on Perturabo and how I relate to him as a person. But what do you think about Perturabo? Do you think he is an especially bitter person and it was in his genetics to do so because the Emperor is also kind of a sociopath? Or do you think he was absolutely destroyed by his personal upbringing and thus wasn't given much of a chance? Or maybe somewhere in between? Let me know in the comments. I'm especially interested in him as a character. Also, remember to like and subscribe as it helps the channel.
Do it,
and before I go, if you think that this was a bunch of pseudo-intellectual bullshit, then wait till you get to Angron. I feel like I should start offering free therapy sessions after I do that one.
Well done. I really like that take on it. I honestly think he is right. It was the product of his upbringing. Even though he did have a loving sister, most people did treat him with apathy or as like a tool, kind of like, you know, how the Emperor does. And I could totally see that being the case. After watching the Arthur Bones video, I really want to watch the Sanguinius one, because I want to know what he says about Sanguinius. Other than that, he's the best, amazing, most special golden hawk boy there ever was.